Dr. Trentinella, it is a joy and a privilege to have you accompany us in this Lenten series, to be our docent in a way as we walk through some amazing works of art that are part of our Visio Divina series. Thank you so much for your insights.
I'm very excited, always excited to talk about art with anyone who's willing to listen.
That's great. And we're starting today with one of the most famous artists who ever lived, Michelangelo, known as a sculptor and a painter. And in this case, we're talking about one of the most famous paintings of all time.
Arguably, yes. I routinely poll my students and ask if they're familiar with certain names. And the joke that seems to, at least so far, still work is not one of the Ninja Turtles for nothing. So I also will ask my students, what is he most famous for? Mm-hmm. And anecdotally, I will get a 50-50 split. He was a sculptor, he was a painter. And if you asked him, if we had a time machine, he would not even hesitate to say, don't call me a painter. That's not my job. That's not my role. Don't ask me to paint. I'd much rather do anything else. This isn't just speculation. We have his own words. There is a letter that he wrote in sonnet form in Italian, follows the meter and the rhyme of Italian sonnet to a good friend of his, in which, if once translated, we understand is effectively a long complaint about the difficulty, the stress. There's a tone of despair in painting the Sistine chapel ceiling. There's also a misconception. I ask a lot of students and they'll tell me, oh, right, in elementary school, we laid under our desks and had a piece of paper taped, and we laid on the floor and pretended to be Michelangelo. It's a common misconception. He built a scaffold and describes, and there's a small doodle, a drawing he made of himself, stretching up over his head, beard to the sky, with paint dripping on his face. That's how he created the paintings that we see on the Sistine ceiling. There's been a lot of focus art historically on the significance of the two fingers. For example, creation of Adam. Are Adam and God approaching? Are they receding? Is this the moment prior? Is this the moment after? So much discussion, zoomed in images, analysis of the angle of God's robes flowing in one or another direction. And I cannot help but think of Michelangelo up on a scaffold, many meters, maybe grumbling to himself about this work that he's doing when his calling in life was to sculpt. If you also look really closely at the way he has depicted on a two-dimensional surface in fresco the muscle groups, you can tell he is very familiar with human anatomy, with how muscles will bunch under the skin. In Florentine art at the time, there's a prevailing style called disegno, which means drawing, and it prioritized very crisp and clean outlines and forms that I imagine Michelangelo was very adept at, but also might have preferred, because it's a more sculptural way to paint, if there's a way to say that. And so if you're interested in the visual style, there's one way to approach it. What was his mindset? Is he trying to paint like a sculptor? If you're looking at the symbolism, then there's an entire different line of reasoning. But if you go back to the creator's mindset of manifesting these images on a ceiling, there's anecdotal evidence from the Renaissance where Michelangelo had a reputation of being a bit grumpy. Whether these are to be believed or not is open to interpretation, but I imagine if he's not happy, he's not at his happiest painting a ceiling when he would much rather be working on that Pope's tomb project, sculpting a massive monument for posterity. It adds a new layer when you're looking at something like the creation of Adam or any of the scenes on the Sistine ceiling. That level of brilliance that people call him a genius, rightfully so, for the skill in a field he thought himself ill-equipped to execute.
So shifting gears a little bit to another work of art that you have chosen for us to look at today is an artist that in the grand scheme of art history is probably not known as well as Michelangelo, but at least there in Florence, very well known. And the medium of his art is very different from a painting on a ceiling. Tell us about Ghiberti and these marvelous doors at the entrance to the baptistry in Florence.
Yes. These are known today as the Gates of Paradise. And according to one tradition, Michelangelo gave them that name, who was reported to have been so impressed by this feat of artistic genius that he deemed them worthy to be the gates to heaven. So that's how we commonly now refer to them. The technique is cast bronze with gilding, which is a thin layer of gold that has been applied to the surface. So in photographs where you see that it has this golden color, that truly is gold leaf, gold foil that is bonded to the bronze. Another interesting factor from my perspective is that each of these panels had to be cast as a single piece. In the process of lost wax, you have to create a model that is then molded in wax, which then gets encased in clay. The molten bronze is poured into the gap, and that's how you end up with the final product. There's so many places where this process can go wrong.
Wow.
And these doors were an innovation in the time. The building itself, the baptistry, had two previous sets of doors, one of which had been made by Ghiberti. Barely before he was done, the patrons of the monument who were seeking its refurbishment were so impressed, they immediately commissioned him to make another set of doors. And he on his own decided to break from the visual format and create only 10 panels in which multiple moments of narrative were combined in a single scene. And so, for example, in the Genesis panel, you can find the creation of Adam, the creation of Eve, the temptation, the expulsion, but you almost have to hunt for them around the panel because they don't follow a narrative left to right linear sequence. And so each of these 10 panels was one section of biblical story that had multiple moments that Ghiberti had to choose and design and construct a panel that then in a single cast would be produced and hopefully come out the way he wanted before then finishing touches could be added. So chasing, punching, small surface details to bring out things like eyelashes, wrinkles. In the Genesis panel, there are two tiny little lizards on the bottom corner when Adam is being raised up from a lump of clay. No one on the ground would have seen those lizards.
Because these are at the top of the doors.
The doors follow chronologically. Yeah. So Genesis is on the top left, and there are then 5 panels down the left door, and 5 panels down the right door. I don't have the exact measurements, but if you put a me-sized human, for example, imagine maybe 2 of me on top of myself is about how high up off the ground that Genesis panel is. So an art historian might look at this and wonder, for whom these lizards? Is Ghiberti including this detail for himself to say that he could? People on the ground might have had a hard time noticing them. Is he making those lizards for God to see how good of an artist he is? There are so many paths to follow and trying to figure out the decision making. But this is a case almost the opposite of Michelangelo, where an artist is working in the medium he was trained in and flexing, you could say, what he can do with that material to the point where Michelangelo himself was impressed. If we believe, if the anecdotal stories were accurate.
Dr. Trentinella, thank you for bringing these 2 works of art to life for us.
Thank you.